All right, it's Brain Muffin back with some nerd stuff. And so, technology, when the tech mythology collapses, the industry's fall from grace may feel unprecedented, but we have a model for what happens when a beloved industry fails. A lot of businesses, industries have fallen from grace. Think back a few years before the Amazon HQ2 sweepstakes, before Susan Fowler's viral blog post, before the Me Too movement, before 2016 election across the nation. Silicon Valley was the crown jewel of the economy. The companies were youthful and ambitious. Well, you know what? But see, the Y2K stuff, they had a huge thing in Silicon Valley too, and then it went kaboom. So this is like the second time around that this has happened. You know, the new economy. Was it Pets? Not PetSmart. It was Pets. Pet. I don't know, a bunch of online companies, and then they had all those huge Super Bowl commercials, and poof, the next year they were gone. The culture was loose and exciting. The capabilities they put in the world's pockets were astonishing. Talk to anyone, know everything, buy anything, all with a few taps on glass. Yes, this had unleashed unprecedented surveillance possibilities, as Edward Snowden revealed, but these were still the most beloved companies in the country. Their founders were legends. Legends! The past several weeks have been like the past 2 years in miniature. First, the New York Times released a blockbuster article about Google's sexual harassment problems that placed the blame both on the institution itself and the co-founder and current CEO, Larry Page. Then Amazon selected its new headquarters, releasing a torrent of criticisms on the deals. There were municipalities subsidizing the richest man in the world in a race to the bottom. And finally, yesterday, Times put out a 50-source story about Facebook's obliviousness to its own platform's darker possibilities. In a statement today, Facebook's board of directors called the story grossly unfair. At home in Northern California, San Francisco voters overwhelmingly passed a tax designed to extract money from tech companies to help ease homelessness in the city. But that's not what's causing homelessness. It's not a lack of tax money. Oh my goodness, this is going to make things worse. Morons. Across the Bay, Oakland voters passed a progressive property transfer tax, which was another way of taxing the enormous wealth that's poured into the Bay Area, and it's going to pour right on out. Locally and nationally, the tech industry has gone from bright young stars to Death Star. Not only have Silicon Valley companies turned out to be roughly as dirty in their corporate maneuverings as old oil companies or military contractor, but yeah, when they get this big, that's the problem. No one's told them no. No one's gotten in their way, so they think they can do anything, and it just happens. This is human nature. You just go watch Jordan Peterson videos. You'll figure this out. Founder worship, they've been almost ubiquitously controlled by a tiny number. They're always it's not unique. These companies are always controlled by a tiny number of people. Again, this is just human nature. The stupidity. This is from theatlantic.com, so I should expect this complete lack of knowledge and information on the part of the writer. As in most things, Facebook distills, or at least embodies, these industry practices. After a brutal 2 years that started with the 2016 election, Mark Zuckerberg responded by placing loyalists in charge of all Facebook. Well, why wouldn't he? The company lobbyists pushed a line that its opponents were linked to George Soros while reporting other enemies to the Anti-Defamation League. Yeah, well, Google does the same thing. They're all backed by Soros. Where does this almost unbelievable bad news cycle end for these companies? It doesn't. And what if these news stay bad, but the people using their products can't? Now they're going after the competitors. They're trying to shut down Gab. They've already shut down vid.me, and now they're going after BitChute and others. So yeah. A historic analog with this fall from grace does exist. Well, of course. There was a time when America was loved and talked about the transcontinental railroads, and they were loved and talked. Yeah, and then they got all kinds of crazy deals and You can't see this is what I keep telling people. These companies cannot get this big without help from the government in one form or another, because you'll reach a point where there's not enough energy to put into the system, and entropy takes over, and you'll start falling apart. And unless you have something like the government, which has a bottomless pit of money and influence to help hold together, steel lines spanning the nation were, as the Stanford historian Richard White put it, the epitome of modernity. Americans were in love with railroads because railroads defined the age. The claims made for railroads by men who wrote about them were always extravagant. Yeah, of course. Constant over the making of a modern America. The kind of hyperbole hyperbole, I know. Hyperbole recently fashioned on the internet was, and once, yeah, of course. And then, it was other things before them. And, anyway, the public turned on on transcontinental railroads, innovations entrepreneurs brought to the railroads, finance mechanisms, pricing, innovations, and political techniques were as harmful to the republic, and even to the corporations. They were profitable to many of the innovators. Yep. But because basically you end up building monopolies, you end up building these government-controlled and sponsored things, and the people who get elected want to stay elected, and the people who have the power want to keep the power. Most despised institutions of the country, and a core reason why monopoly became such a terrible word. When the railroad methodology collapsed, it helped create an entire political ideal, the progressivism, which is cancer. It's an answer to the wrong question. That Americans fell in love with railroads in the Gilded Age. They helped usher in that the railroads became corrupt monopolies that built, again, with government influence, lobbying organizations, that the transcontinental railroads ended up failing businesses that still generated some of the richest people in the world. This story is often told separately from the one about supposedly glorious creation and operation of the network itself. The men, among them Leland Stanford, the founder of the university that educated so many of today's disruptors, were still revered, subject only to what White calls "say what you will" criticisms. The people who founded the great internet companies of today, Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, I guess, Bezos, I don't even know how to pronounce anything anymore, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, are experiencing a fast motion version of the transcontinental story. Having built Facebook, Amazon, and Google, rewiring the experience of being alive, and these men have seen their companies experience a mighty backlash. Yeah, but, they're scumbags. I mean, the sexual harassment and all that other stuff, you find that in any company, unfortunately. I didn't say any company, but you do find it way too often. And it's not surprising. I mean, this guy, obviously, this Alexis C. Madrigal, he must be I guess he's a foreigner, I don't know. But obviously the writer of this article is not very keen on what goes on in Hollywood even. Zuckerberg, who cares how much they're worth? A number that ticked up even as activists and pundits criticized the HQ2 decision. Say what you will, they've built world historic empires, no matter what ultimately becomes of them. Yeah, but this is the whole corporate welfare problem. This is the whole problem with once they introduce welfare as legal into the government, it went from individuals to corporations, and it just exploded. So this is nothing new. This is obviously, at least, but we had this earlier on. We had this with IBM. We had Microsoft and Yahoo were big in the 90s. Microsoft was doing all kinds of anti-competitive things. And under the Clinton administration, there was somewhat of a lawsuit, but it was bull crap. And they never went after the things that Microsoft was actually doing to bring down competition. They never. It's all show trial, because it's to me it's very similar to what happens. Is it Godfather Part 2, where he's put on trial, and the whole thing is someone has to take the fall. We also have this with I think in Casino, they find some chump that then supposedly was responsible for all this stuff. Or they just go through it. They pretend to do something that's really meaningless. Most people don't know the difference, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the government took over Microsoft. I'm going to go back to sleep now." And this guy's really must be asleep. But there aren't any comments, so there's nothing else to read. But this is what happens. But they can only get so, like I said, most companies can only get to certain size, and it's different depending on the industry, without serious government help. Whether it's local government giving them tax liens, but again, if you're having to give, not say lower taxes, or do maybe you don't pay taxes for 5 years or 10 years or something like that, like Obama did with GE, that means your taxes are too high. If you have to deflate your taxes to get businesses to come there and incentivize businesses and basically, subsidize them moving to you, then that means your taxes are too high. Your government's too big. Get rid of 20% of your government, and you'll have a 20% less need for taxes. And then you'll have an actual environment in which businesses can grow, Now, businesses still have to fail. I mean, when they get to, if the industry changes or whatever, a business has to be allowed to go through bankruptcy and go out of business or maybe get bought up. This is how new ideas get regenerated as the phoenix out of those ashes. And when we prop them up like we did, the too big to fail nonsense, when everything, speculation and debacle and all that, basically the end of Bush's term and into Obama, and we prop these companies up, that is bad economic sense. It makes sense very, very short term, but long term it's very bad economics, and that's why the United States is in such deep, deep debt, because it's been doing it for decades. Let these guys flap in the wind and let the chips fall where may, and don't give them the liens. I mean, the tax incentives. If you're, like I said, if you're having to do that to get new businesses into your area, you have taxes that are too high. And this right here will do nothing whatsoever but empower the government. It will not make homelessness better. It will not improve the lives of anybody except the bureaucrats who will be in charge of this mess right here. So, all right, thanks for stopping by. What do you think? Do you think this is a good idea, bad idea? Do you think I'm full of crap? Let me know. See you. Bye.